Hi, I'm Steve Hayes, and I'm a pastor, and I'm a sinner. And I love stories. I love to hear people's stories. I love to hear how God has worked in their lives to help change them and make them who they are. And I think we all need to hear those kinds of stories. So I hope you'll enjoy it and listen along with This Is My Story.
I am Michael Anders, and this is my story.
All right. Hey, everybody. We're here with Michael Landers, who is the athletic director at Navarro College and a member of our church, and just a great guy to talk to, great guy to be around. Michael, let's start with this, okay? You are kind of famous in certain circles around here locally for being
Which circles are those?
Well, you'll know as soon as I say this. You're a little bit famous for being like just an incredible trash talker. Where did you develop that skill?
I do have some strength in that area. I mean, I grew up playing sports my entire life, and I'll tell people I was really good. I probably wasn't, but. And I think just my personality, my father-in-law tells me that I am the most sarcastic person he's ever met. But it's like I jab a lot, and I don't mind receiving it as well. But it's just kind of how I have fun with people.
Yeah, it's a give and take, and it's in a lot of ways it's the way men kind of relate to each other. Just kind of razz each other a little bit.
And it's funny. We have a guys group, a bunch of my friends, people that have taken me into their group, and Stuart Smith is one of those, and Stuart and I go at each other quite a bit.
Yeah.
I guess
kind of easy pickings.
Well, I mean, he's an Aggie. I mean, so the door's already opened.
Yes.
But we have a lot of fun with each other, and I think it's. We enjoy each other's company, the entire group, there's a camaraderie amongst us, and I think we support each other really, really well.
Yeah.
And I know, there was a time last year where we were doing some challenges as a group through one of your studies, and trying to pray for our friends every day, there were several members in that group, Grant and Stuart, that push you to be better, and they push me to be better, and watching who they are and what they represent, and so I have to be careful every once in a while, because sometimes I let my jokes and stuff become too much, instead of sometimes just sitting back and having serious conversations, that sort.
I'm sure some of that comes from your coaching background too. Just knowing how to push buttons in players.
I would say so. Sports themselves lend to trash talking and competitiveness, that sort of thing. And I was very fortunate when I was coaching that we had a lot of really good players, and so we had a lot of really good teams, and we were fortunate we won quite a bit at times, and probably had some confidence that turned into cockiness, and that kind of leads into it. But I think you're right in terms of the coaching part of pushing buttons. You deal with so many different personalities, and there's certain players that you got to hug and hold on to. There's certain players that you got to kick in the rear. That they all respond differently, and I think trying to figure out what makes each person tick is allows you to reach them in their own way.
So how'd you get into coaching? You were an athlete. You played basketball. Did you play other sports?
I played basketball, baseball, and football.
Okay.
My dad was a coach, and so I remember starting in first grade, going to practices, and I would get home from school in the evenings, and literally I would dribble a basketball around the porch or out in the driveway until they told me it was time to come in, and then I would get up I got up early in the mornings, and I would go outside and shoot baskets until my mom told me it was time to come in and take a shower and get ready for school. So, I mean, I grew up around it my entire life.
Right. And eventually you realize that that's what you wanted to do with your life?
Yeah, late.
Yeah.
I went to college with the idea I was going to be a doctor,
Really?
and was preparing for medical school, looking into things, and then fall semester of my senior year, I went to my college basketball coach and said, "Hey, I don't think I want to be a doctor." And he goes, "Well, what do you want to be?" And I said, I want to be a coach." And he said, "Well, all right, be a coach." And which was great until I had to tell my family because that was not the plan that they thought I should follow through. And so it took a while before I told them, and I have never regretted it.
I think the world needs more trash talking doctors.
I don't know that it worked well in that field. So I ended up staying in school an extra semester to get my teaching certificate.
Gotcha.
And then had an opportunity the moment I graduated at East Texas Baptist. The women's coach asked me if I'd stick around a year and help, and that turned into 24 more years after that.
What was the top of the world for you in the coaching profession? What was your greatest moment in coaching?
Outside of seeing kids, I mean, obviously the best thing about coaching is watching someone come in and when they finally see the light, and sometimes you're there and you get to see it because it happens on your watch.
Right.
A lot of times, more often than not, it happens after they're already gone.
Right.
Where they may reach back out to you 2 years later or 5 years later and say, I get it now. Now I understand. And so watching some of those kids that you didn't know if they were going to make it or not, and watching them finally, graduate and walk across the stage and get jobs and get married and have kids, that sort of thing, that is obviously, that's why coaches coach. So, outside of that, of an actual sports thing, I was fortunate. I don't know that she would agree, but I felt fortunate that for 2 years, Kenny and I served as co-head coaches together. And the first year we did that was in 2011, and we lost in the national championship game. And then the next year, the second year that we coached together, we went undefeated and won a national championship. And I have a picture in my office of her and I holding Michaela's hands because Michaela was 2 and Kenny was 8 months pregnant with Larkin as we were walking out onto the court to get the national championship trophy. And
where was that?
It was in Salina, Kansas.
That's awesome.
And so that was a really cool, selfish moment because I got to experience that moment with my daughter and my wife, who's my best friend, and the fact that we were able to do that together was pretty cool.
That's amazing. That's awesome. What's your lowest moment in the coaching profession?
Oh, wow. Lowest moment is goes back to what I said was the best moment. And the best moment is when you see kids that get it. And the lowest moment is when you tried to reach a kid and you can't. And there's more than one, sadly, but there's a young lady that I coached at Trinity Valley that I couldn't reach. We couldn't get her over the hump. And I mean, I remember recruiting her and going to pick her up at a house one day, and there were prostitutes in the house in the middle of the afternoon. The house had condemned signs on it, and she came out and I said, "Do you want to get away for a little while?" She goes, "Yeah," and we went and I ended up buying her 3 or 4 meals that she could take back to her house and stash away. And we had her for 1.5 years, and she didn't make it. And and I know what life she was going back to live. Yeah. And and there's others like that, and that's just, it hurts because you see the potential in them, but you can't always get them to get over that mark and get to where they possibly could.
Yeah. Does that haunt you? Some of those kids?
Yes. because you constantly look back and say, well, I should have given them one more chance. I should have tried this. I should have went down this road with them. And you try your best in every single situation. And hindsight's easy.
Right.
But when you're in the moment and you're responsible for more than one kid, and that's part of the decision that goes in is I want to give this person more chances and more chances and more chances, but is that fair? And what am I teaching? Right. Her other 12 or 14 or 15 teammates.
Now, going back a little bit into your life, did you grow up in a faith-filled family? Did you grow up in a religious home?
I did. I grew up in a Catholic home.
Okay.
I was adopted at birth. Mm-hmm. I was adopted when I was 8 days old. Wow. Through Catholic Charities. And so I grew up in the Catholic Church early on, and then my mom got divorced when I was in kindergarten, eventually got remarried, and so we always went to church. I wouldn't say we were deeply religious.
Right.
And so my mom, when she remarried a coach, and so we moved quite a bit. And every time we moved, we'd find a church. And so, I grew up in a Catholic home. We went to a Methodist church. I've been to an Episcopal church. I've been to the Baptist church. We just kind of, wherever. And when I got into high school, we were living in North Dallas, and I started going back to the Catholic church. And then I went to East Texas Baptist University, and went to the Catholic Church in Marshall while I was there.
Really?
And so kind of, I would say we were all believers, but I wouldn't say that we were a strong Christian home because we would fade in and out.
Yeah. Yeah. So when did faith in Christ become yours?
All right. So after you and I talked last night, I was thinking about some things. I think for me, my faith started becoming important in 2006.
Really?
That's when Kenny and I started dating.
Okay.
And she went to church in Dallas. Had always been to, had the same home church forever. It's Concord Baptist. And Pastor Brian Carter. I mean, it's a huge church. It's probably, 15,000-20,000 members. And so I started going, when she and I started dating, I started going there. And I'd grown up in and out of church my entire life. I went to a Baptist university. I've taken New Testament 1 and New Testament 2. I've taken basic Christian doctrines, that sort. I knew God. I knew about Jesus. I believed in God, but I don't think it was ever truly important to me.
Yeah.
Where I really could just stand on it. And, like I said, I grew up, for the most part of my young life, was going to a Catholic church. Mm-hmm. And nothing wrong with that. It's a completely different service. It is very ritualistic and regimented, and without even thinking, you know when to stand up, when to kneel, when to pray, when to stand up, when to sit down, that sort of thing. Right. You know exactly what you're supposed to say, and so it was just kind of an act that you went to church.
Yeah. And
then you finished, and boom, do crucifix, and then you're out.
Yeah.
And so when I started going to Concord with Kenya, probably the first time in my life where I started hearing the message.
Yeah.
And I truly felt it in my heart for the first time, because after, I don't know if it was 6 months, if it was a year, it might have been 2 years, I don't know. But at Concord, for the first time ever, I started enjoying praise and worship. Mm. And up until that point in my life, I would literally, God, please forgive me, I would roll my eyes and count how many songs we had to sing before we actually could get to the sermon. Mm-hmm. And at Concord, Miss Gail is the music minister, and she sings like an angel, and And I got to where I actually started not all of it, but I started enjoying some of the praise and worship. Now, Kenya loves the praise and worship.
Yeah.
And so I started experiencing more of actual church and actually worshiping in the Lord.
Well, what I'm hearing from you, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that you started to develop an intimate relationship with God, that it wasn't just about kind of religious practices anymore, but it was an actual relationship that connected with you more deeply.
Without question. Yeah. It went from knowing there's a God, knowing Jesus came down and died for us, to actually starting to have a relationship with Christ.
How did that begin to affect your coaching career and the things that you were doing in your life?
I would like to think it made me a better person in terms of how I treated people. I know at that point my life was changing. My priorities were changing. Kenya and I, got married in 2008, and so that changed some of what was truly important to me.
Right.
Because up until that point, my whole focus was winning as many games as I could possibly win. And then for literally the first time in my life, I started going on vacation.
Right.
I would never have done that before. But my focus was changing, and then 2 years later we had Michaela, and that again changed my outlook on stuff. And I would say my faith getting stronger and developing a relationship with God, and then having one daughter and then a second daughter really changed how I coached, because it became not me screaming and pushing my players so hard because when I want somebody coaching my kid the way I'm coaching someone else's kid.
Right.
And that I think that I didn't become Mr. Nice, but I think that I became a little bit more understanding, and I think it calmed me down quite a bit.
Yeah. So it started to have this more pervasive effect in your life, and on how you led. And then I know from the time that you came here, tell us what brought you to Corsicana. How'd you end up here?
So I coached women's basketball for 19 years.
And you've been at some major universities.
I've not. Kenya has. She's the good coach in the family.
Right.
I coached at Trinity Valley. I coached at East Texas Baptist. I coached at a junior college, Baton Rouge Community College in Baton Rouge, and then went back to Trinity Valley again, and left. Took a year away from coaching.
Really?
And was living in Fort Worth, and I was selling video scoreboards. Let me take that back.
Hold on.
Selling video scoreboards would be quite an exaggeration. I didn't sell many of them.
You were in the video scoreboard business.
Yes. I worked for a company that sold video scoreboards.
Okay, so I just got to pause you right there, because that sounds like a miserable year for you.
It was a pretty low point. It was a low point it was a very low point for me. It was a low point for Kenya and for our family.
What year was this?
This was in 2000, from October of 2012 through July of 2013.
Okay, so you developed this walk with Christ at this point. You go through, this is a crisis moment.
Yes.
In your life. We don't have to get into it, but I'm assuming that something happened that got you out of coaching.
I made a terrible mistake, and I had to pay for the consequences. And not only did I pay for my consequences, my family and my two daughters paid for my consequences.
So now you're living with the guilt and shame of that, and you're doing something that you clearly didn't feel like you were cut out to be doing. Mm-hmm. You're a coach. You've coached. You've won a national championship as a coach.
Two of them.
You coach undefeated
teams.
My
trash talking.
Yeah, no, that's great. Hey, don't let me shortchange you, Coach. And now you're selling scoreboards. I mean, that's quite a fall. How'd you handle that year?
Not very well.
Yeah.
Not very well, and it had a major effect on me, and took a long time to bounce back from. It took a toll on Kenny and I, and
I bet.
To the point where, I can't sit here and tell you that every single day I thought we were 100% good.
Right.
Because it was mental toll, emotional distress. It was financial distress. It's like everything was kind of hitting us. I will say that there's no question in my mind that even as hard as it was, without our faith at that point, we wouldn't have got through that. There's no because I felt like, number one, I caused it. I caused us to be in that position. So we didn't blame others.
Yeah.
Like we knew, it was on me. And but we also just kind of sat back and said, you know what, he's going to take care of us. And don't know how and don't know why and don't cry about it. We did cry about it, but just get up the next day and try and be better.
Yeah.
And it's weird. Middle of July, early July, I guess. Johnny Estelle was the basketball coach here at Navarro, and Rourke Montgomery was the AD. I'd known Rourke for 12 years, 14 years at that point. I heard that Johnny was leaving, and I called Rourke and said, hey, feel free to laugh at me, feel free to say no. I said, but would you ever consider hiring a women's basketball coach to be your basketball coach? And he kind of sat there for a little bit, and then we had a conversation, and he said, you need to send your stuff in. And I found out after the fact he called several people that I'd worked with and some other people in our conference, and there were several of them that said you should look at him. And at that time I didn't think I had a chance, but God opened the door. And Kenya got a job literally as I was going through the interview process. Kenya took a job coaching in high school in Richland, in North Richland Hills. And I remember it was one of her first days to be at the gym, and I drove up to see her that morning and saw her new office and that sort of thing. And as I'm walking out of the building, I got back in my car, and I was going to go out and try to sell another scoreboard. As I literally am pulling off out of the parking lot, I got a phone call, and it was from Rourke and Dr. Cavalier, who was the president of Navarro at the time, and they said that they offered me the job. And I pulled over, and we'll do it right now. I pulled over and started crying because it had been a very dark place, and it didn't solve all the problems, but I felt like it was the first step back.
Yeah. And
I had no idea at that point what that phone call would mean to me and our family, because we had just got a house in North Richland Hills.
Right.
And this is now the 1st of August. And so I spent a year, if there was nobody on the road, I could make it an hour and 35 minutes.
Got it.
But if I hit traffic, it was going to be about 2:10.
Yeah.
And I spent a year driving back and forth, not every day, but I would typically drive down on Monday mornings, and I'd drive home on Tuesday nights, and then drive down on Wednesday mornings and drive back on Thursday or Friday. And
which you did gladly.
I did.
Because this was your second chance.
I did. I didn't have a problem with it whatsoever.
I bet you never looked at a scoreboard the same again.
I did not. I did not.
They look a lot different from the coaching chair than they do from the salesman.
And it felt so good just to be back doing what I felt like I was supposed to be doing.
Man, you just needed a second chance. And a lot of dominoes had to fall to give you that.
Mm-hmm. And
it clearly has made an impact on you. How has it made you better? As a coach, as a man, as a follower of Christ?
I think that it obviously strengthened our faith, because there's no way that door opens on its own. There's no way that door opens on its own.
You can't explain that without God.
No,
and His presence in your life.
That is exactly what happened, and then where that one domino has led to so many things.
Yeah. But really, would you? I mean, I've thought about this in my own life when I'm looking at, and I mean, let's not sugarcoat it. When I'm looking at my own personal failures and what they have cost me, when I look back on my life and I see those moments, I think, in that critical moment, would I have taken a chance on myself? And I'm like, no, I don't think I would have. I mean, would you have taken a chance on yourself?
You're exactly right.
It's got to be God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry. Continue. So how did it affect you from there going forward?
In terms of coaching, it made me. I appreciated my job so much more.
Mm-hmm. Were you more gracious with your players?
I think so.
Yeah. You're a hard driving dude.
I am. Yes, I was. Yes, and especially if you talk to my kids who played for me the first 5 years or first 10 years.
Yeah.
I still. There's a group of young ladies from East Texas Baptist that I still stay in touch with. That, gosh, when they start telling stories about what I made them do, I just cringe.
Yeah.
But so I did. I changed kind of how I coached. And it was great for me because I went from coaching women to coaching men, and so it was a perfect time for me to tweak some stuff because it goes back to pushing buttons, and some of those buttons you had to push were different.
Yeah.
And so I think it helped me in that regard. I think it helped me definitely appreciate things more.
Yeah.
And I think something that I've continued with it is. I don't feel like I'm pretty confident that I look at people who screw up and I don't judge them near as hard as I maybe would have 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Because I think we all get at certain moments in life and we do things that, in hindsight, really easy to say, well, you shouldn't have done that.
Mm.
Well, in the moment, maybe they weren't thinking the right way. And I don't know what steps led them to get into a certain spot where they had to make a decision like that.
Right.
And so I think I've become more forgiving of people because people have forgiven me for the mistakes that I made and the poor decisions that I've made. And so I think that helps me. It helps me have a better perspective on things. And I think I've also, I don't take things nearly for granted that I maybe did a decade ago.
Yeah. So, so you grew up on teams with tons of diversity. You grew up since you were young, watching your dad coach kids who were black. You married an African American woman, and it's just never been an issue for you. Why do you think it's an issue for so many people? Or do you think it's an issue for so many people?
There's no question it's an issue for people.
Good.
There's no question. And I think one of the problems is there's too much of the population that doesn't think it's an issue.
Okay.
And because they don't think it's an issue, they don't see the problems that exist. And there's not a simple fix, but all right. so much of it is, and I know there's so many new buzzwords, but the more if you truly look into it, there is systemic racism. And while a person may not treat the person right next to them in a racist way, everybody does not start on equal ground.
Right.
And so the question or the phrase, he didn't hit a triple. He started on third.
Right. Yeah.
And others are starting miles behind and don't have the same doors or opportunities to be presented, so they never have a true chance.
Right. So what do you think the goal is? Because here's where I struggle in that. I agree with you 100%. I mean, we don't all start at the same place. Some of us start, you talk about the idea of privilege. That doesn't really bother me. I grew up, my dad was a pediatrician. My mom was a guidance counselor, both graduate degrees. Both responsible parents. Now, I lost my dad in a car accident at 6. So, that was difficult. But when you look at the issue of fatherlessness in the black community, it's pervasive. And so, when you're growing up poor, when you're growing up when an education is not a value, when you're growing up in a single parent home, most likely a single mother home, you're miles behind a lot of the kids who grew up with a family intact, with some sort of financial stability, all these other things. And I'm not saying every black kid grows up that way, but there is a higher incidence of that in the black community for a number of different reasons. What I struggle with is, what do we do about it? What do we do? Is the goal, and can we even? How do we make that a more level starting point for people?
There's not a quick fix.
Yeah.
And this is where, as a father, I am discouraged because I don't think it's going to be fixed in the next generation. I think the work has to start now, but I think it's going to be 1 or 2 generations before we see true results. And I say, as a father, it's discouraging because I have 2 young daughters that are going to grow up when it's not fixed.
Right.
Hopefully it's growing up in a better place. But so I have to tell this because this is there's so many different levels to it.
Yeah.
All right. So Kenya has a younger brother. Corey is 30 years old. He's got a college degree. He and his wife, she has her own personal business. She's got a college degree. They both work in Dallas at 2 different high schools in athletics, and they're as awesome a people as they could possibly be. And I know Kenya worries every time he drives somewhere.
Right.
Because if he were to get pulled over, nobody knows all the hundreds and thousands of good things he's done.
Right.
He is a young black male. Monday of this week, I got pulled over. And Kenny will laugh because I got pulled over for speeding, and I never speed.
Right.
But I happened to be speeding at that point. And I got pulled over, and it had just turned dark. It's around 8 o'clock, and I got pulled over on 287 on the side of the road. There's no gas stations, no business anywhere. I were pulled over on the side of the road. I'm in the car by myself. I roll the window down. The officer comes up. They ask for my license and my registration, or license and insurance. It's dark. It's a female officer. I give them my license, and she says, "Is this the correct address?" And I said, "Does it say 2400 or 2409? She said, "It's 2409. And I said, "That's not correct. I built a house across the street."
Yeah.
She said, "Okay." I lean over and open my glove box looking for my insurance card. I've not been pulled over since I've gotten this car.
Yeah.
I am digging through my glove box.
Yeah.
She's not moved. She's just standing right there.
Yeah.
I can't find my insurance card. Actually, I found an old one. And I said, this is all I have. And she said, don't worry, I can run it and see if you have insurance.
Yeah.
She goes back to her car, comes back in 3 minutes, gives me a warning, and says, go.
Yep.
Now tell me if that's not white privilege,
right.
that I can have the wrong address, no valid insurance, and I'm allowed to, without even saying, excuse me, officer, I'm going to look in my glove box. I just leaned over and opened my glove box.
Right.
It's two different worlds.
And
that's not right.
There's so many stories like that where black men have the concern that you just expressed, and you didn't think twice about it. You know, it wasn't even a thought in your mind. So I guess my thought, though, is, and you know this from coaching too, regardless of the level of privilege to underprivileged, when they come to you, when you were coaching, when they come to you, whoever it may be, your goal is to get the best out of them no matter what their starting point is, no matter where they come from. Your goal is everybody who walks in this gym is starting fresh with me. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now that's in coaching. In the real world, outside of the gym, you know, how do we build that mindset of you're starting fresh with me? It's harder. It's just more complicated.
It is,
and you don't expect a kid who comes inner city, who has no parental guidance. You don't expect him to work any differently than a kid who comes with a different background and different privilege.
No, and that's where I think sports is so great, because it's to me it's the great equalizer. Like it's inside of a team itself, everything should be fair.
At the end of the day, you got to work hard and run the plays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
but that doesn't transfer out into the rest of the world.
Right. And you're dealing with people, many times, people from various different backgrounds who don't, you know, you may have the skill on the basketball court to work hard and run the plays. You may not have the skill in the classroom. Like just telling a kid to work hard, that's not going to really go anywhere, right?
No, I mean, everybody has different skill sets, and everybody has different strengths. And if you with your strengths, you may be able to do certain things without trying as hard. With your weaknesses, if you do nothing, they're gonna still be a weakness.
Right.
If you want to be able to still perform, you have to work on those weaknesses and strengthen those, or get help in those areas. You know.
I think the biggest problem that we see right now with this issue and a lot of the things that you've discussed here is, like, it's not hard for me to see that those things are true. Fixing them, figuring out how to work that out, how to make that better. It just feels so complicated and overwhelming. That's the part that kind of keeps me up at night about this issue, because I look at the way we're trying to fix them right now. Okay, politically, you know, and it seems like we're chasing our tail there. And a lot of times I think it almost fuels more problems. Media involvement. You know, we're in this 24/7 news cycle. I think the one good thing about media as it relates to this issue is that we are hearing stories that we would have never heard before.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a good thing, but I also think media just also kind of fuels and makes this where it's hard to talk to each other about it.
Yes.
Because you're either in one camp or the other. You can't. There's no middle ground anymore in any area of life. And then I think sometimes I wonder, it's just me, but sometimes I wonder, Yes, those things are true. Yes, there's privilege and bias and all of these things. When it comes down to it, though, everybody's got to live their life and make their choices and make decisions along the way. All those things are present. How do you encourage making choices that'll lift you out of the problems of the world? And does that happen just by because everybody's mad, everybody's pissed off right now, you know? So that's all I see right now is everybody's mad. And that's where, again, as a man of faith, as a pastor, I think the best way to move forward in this is to recognize that in Christ, first of all, there's nobility in who you are. God has made you in his image, regardless of how much melatonin or melanin is in your skin, not melatonin. But you're made in his image. And then that gives you an inherent nobility. And then I believe God wants the best for you. He wants you to walk in his goodness. And so I think the gospel has a unique nobility that it gives to people. And if people were to realize that, and if the church were to step out in that and come together along those lines, I think it could be powerful.
I agree. And I thought your conversation last week, one of our problems is we have two different churches.
Yes.
But we also have two different lives. It's not just church.
It's cultural.
But I know how you believe, and the church should be at the forefront of it.
Yes.
And so maybe if the church changes, that will start to bleed over into society and culture, and
ultimately the gospel is Jesus is the answer to so many of our problems, but we can't get out of our own way to get to him.
I don't have the answers.
Yeah, it's hard.
I think one of the most discouraging things to me, there's so many, but one thing that's really discouraging right now is what you just kind of hit on, is part of the solution is being able to talk to people.
Yeah.
And we have, I don't know if it's because of social media and because you're behind a screen or what, we've lost the ability to talk to one another and to have discussions.
Yeah.
Because whether it's politics or race or whatever, too many times people start a conversation and they have their viewpoint, and it does not matter what you say. I am going to stick with my viewpoint regardless of any facts, regardless of any persuasion. I'm not changing. Yeah. And if you don't believe what I believe, then you're an idiot.
Right.
And that's not how it works.
Yeah. We don't talk to people, we talk through people now. We let the pundits talk for us. And anything you say that either aligns or detracts from what they say places you in a camp. And so now if you're in that camp, we don't have anything to talk about. Mm-hmm. You're on the red team or the blue team. And I'm on Jesus' team, man. That's what I want to be known for, you know. So I think you're right. Part of it is transcending all the noise and just getting down to what do you think? What is your experience? How have you made it through this? You know, and that seems to be lost in our society. Mm-hmm. That's part of the reason why we're doing this.
Yeah. People have lost the ability to listen.
Yeah.
And to reason.
Yeah. Man, I pray we can overcome this, because it's just, you know, the division, it's taking a toll on me. Just knowing what's going on in like Kenosha, Wisconsin, you know, or wherever, you know, people that filled with anger, hurt, frustration, whatever it may be, on all sides of this. It hurts me, man. I've been more hurt by that than I have by COVID. COVID bothers me. It's been this cloud of uncertainty over our world. But COVID is something that I can't control. It's a outside deal that has come in, but this is internal. These are the roots of who we are as people. And man, it is unsettling to me that we can't do a better job of just coming together as basic humanity, Anyway, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about that because I think your perspective is different. It's just part of your normal everyday experience. Has been your whole life. So, all right, dude, thanks for visiting about all of this. I don't know how much of that's going to make it in here or not, but this
has been good.
We'll figure it out. I appreciate you being a part of it. Thanks for being real about it.
I enjoyed it.
If you enjoyed our show, please subscribe. And if you'd like to spread the word, please consider leaving a 5-star review and tell your friends to subscribe too. Our video podcast is available on our Grace Community Church YouTube channel. This Is My Story is produced and engineered by Jake Moore and is a ministry of Grace Community Church in Corsicana, Texas. The views and opinions expressed on this show are those of the speaker and do not necessarily express the views of Grace Community Church. Thanks for listening.